Hey there, good people, and welcome to another episode of The Finnovator with me, Stuart Bell, business coach, founder of our Dairy Coaching Consulting, and author of Finnovation. Today's podcast has been 8 years in the making. Today I got the opportunity to sit down and speak at length with Clayton Daniel. For those of you who know Clayton, or you know him personally, he's one of those people you just enjoy working with. He's full of such enthusiasm, such energy, and most importantly, he's also incredibly passionate about the journey he's been on. Clayton, for those of you who know him as part of XY Advisor, was, let's be honest, the driving force behind this. I began this talking about the fact that pre-XY Advisor, you know, a lot of the events I used to go to in the industry had this format of kind of the same people sitting around a room where everyone's eating lunch, plates clanging against cutlery, and just talking about the same things. But XY was a bit of a revolution. It kind of changed the nature of the conversation. It made it a lot more informal and ultimately opened the world to advisors engaging with each other through a social medium. And since the birth of XY, that business has been on an incredible journey of trying to work out how to evolve, what to do, and where to focus. And it's led to the place that it is now with the launch a couple of years ago now of Ensombl, which is, as you'll see from listening to this, Clayton has some huge goals for. This wasn't a conversation I loved, and I loved it because I got to know a lot about Clayton that I didn't already know. A lot of what drives him, a lot of what he wants to have, and a lot of the trials and tribulations that those of you who, even those of you who have been part of XY and now Ensombl, you know, you may have heard about or you may have a sense of, but they really give you a sense of what a determined and just great person to be doing this Clayton is. So I hope you get an absolute bundle out of this. I hope you get to know Clayton more, but I hope you get a sense of where he sees the industry going and also, the journey he's been on. So I'm going to hand it over to Clayton and I hope you enjoy this podcast. Okay, let's get this show on the road. To those of you joining me fresh today, thank you very much for coming along. And for those who listen to it on the podcast a bit later on, I hope you're looking forward to what we've got in store. Guys, let me give you a bit of background because I can't actually remember the first time I met Clayton, but I have this memory of being in the room, possibly speaking to Adrian or someone else, and Clayton coming in and basically standing around and saying, I think I've cracked Instagram's code. In other words, how to achieve it. And he went through it, and I was absolutely certain at that point that he'd cracked the code. And I guess for me, this is something I've always been very envious or impressed by Clayton, his ability to kind of look at things, understand how they work, and then deconstruct them and create something that works, but also gets traction. And I think that's at the core of what we're going to talk about here today, because I remember when XY, now Ensombl, first came out, and prior to that, I remember I'd go along. You might remember this as well. I remember I used to head along to, some industry events. There used to be lunchtimes, and you go along, and there'd be people there eating lunch, and there'd be speakers up, white tables, everybody, all the cutlery clinking away, and there'd all be these presentations, which, whilst useful and information packed, they all seem to say the same thing. And then when XY came about, it provided this platform for a different kind of conversation. And it kind of harnessed, I think, a lot of what was happening in terms of digital and what was happening in terms of the way that people engaged. And it was fabulous to watch the way that it's changed. And I think over the past, has it been 8-9 years, maybe even a bit more? It's kind of been at the forefront of a lot of the evolution that we've had as an industry. But what I wanted to do today is kind of dive in underneath it, because underneath it, there is so much of a story about something that really caught fire, so to speak. Then kind of the decisions that were made in the background about what it was going to be and what it wasn't going to be. And there's a whole bunch of things that happened in the background between then and now to where Ensombl is today and really what it's aiming to do. And on top of that, I every time I speak to Clayton, I realize he's someone I know, but every time I speak to him, I realize how much I don't know about him. And I wanted to sort of unpack a little bit about what's motivated him to do it, how he's got to where he is, the skills, and a whole bunch more. So feel free along the way. If you've got any questions, if there's something you want to know, pop it in the chat box. And I'll happily throw any questions we can along the way. And I'm going to make some notes as we go. But that's enough from me. Let's get this show on the road. Clayton, are you there?
I am. How you doing?
Mate, I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, thank you.
Where are you right now?
Yeah. So I'm in a booth in the office, just here at 75 Pitt Street. So it's a lovely sort of winter's day out there. And it's beautiful.
It's one of the soundproof booths.
Yeah, correct. So when we all came together to get this office, for whatever reason, so I think it was Roxy, our chairman, was contacted because there was a startup down the road had gone under, and there were these two really nice booths that we were able to pick up for cents on the dollar. So these actually get used more than the actual meeting rooms. So yeah,
you find that while you're in there on meetings, people tend to wander past and do, try and distract you. Yeah,
100%. That's exactly what
that's
happened.
the thing about those booths. They're such a great idea, but they're just an excuse for people to kind of just try and make you laugh and do weird stuff. But
yes, they get me.
hey man, I feel, as I said, I meant that genuinely. I think we haven't maybe caught up that much, but I feel like when we do, we end up just having these conversations. I learned so much about you, and learn so much about sort of what you've been through. And at the same time, I come away with this feeling that there's so much I don't know, and so I wanted to sort of dive into it. But I mean, I think most people here know you pretty well. But if you were describing what you do and who you are and your role to someone who'd never met you, how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. Formerly XY, now Ensombl. It's a very sort of difficult business and role to describe. It always has been. I think it's been one of the reasons why it's worked, and I think it's been one of the reasons why it's taken so long. So it's kind of been a blessing and a curse. But it at its most simple, rather than if anyone's got a problem, if you're a specialist, if you're an expert in anything, it's easier to ask another specialist or expert than it is to look something up in a textbook or a manual.
Yeah,
it's at its most basic. It is a place for financial planners to share and learn from one another, but delivered in a way that I guess most of us use now, which is on our phones or on a computer,
as opposed to the traditional ways, like the dinners that we used to have.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, don't get me wrong, I like the food. I just thought the format was a bit. Yeah.
100%.
So, how did you obviously didn't start in advice as an industry, did you? Because we were talking about before, you came from very different.
Yeah. So, I came, growing up in a very small coastal town on the east coast here of New South Wales. It was such a small town that believing you could follow your dreams was a legitimate career path, that no one at any stage said, I don't know about that kid. So we decided to be rock stars, because when everything is an option, you have to just pick something, and that seemed like the funnest one to do. And so literally we all went off to study a year at TAFE in Certificate 4 of Music Management.
Right.
We all did that together, and while playing all the time, and eventually we sort of did a bit of touring and a bit of playing, and amassed a small following. And as the story goes, we spent every single waking hour living together, working together as best mates, and it eventually, as most things do, it fell apart. Yeah.
What do you take on the topical Silverchair doing a book without Daniel Johns? Is that a yes or a no?
I love Silverchair.
Yeah. Who wouldn't, right?
Yeah. Silverchair's great.
So, what kind of band? What was the name of the band? That's the first thing I want to know.
Oh, no. I'll never share that, because there are remnants. There are remnants that I just never want to be found.
Okay. So the band that shall remain nameless?
Yeah. So we played, punk rock and sort of alternative rock music, lots of big chords, lots of Marshall stacks, lots of screaming and fast drums, and
Did you have a mohawk, or was that not a thing?
I think at certain stages I definitely did. Yeah.
Nice. The upkeep on that has got to be significant, surely.
It is. That's not even the word. It's the black nails that it makes sense when you're on stage. But when you're sort of, turning up to uni or whatever the next day, it looks a little weird.
There was a whole thing. I remember the game. Remember that book came out? I think we were talking about. But that was one of the things where black nail polish and you stand out. So It's an actual fact that there's a lot of people in our industry who've got a music background. I know there's like I've got a number of clients who are very gifted musicians. So, but I mean, how did you get from the path from being a punk rocker to sort of being involved in advice in the industry?
Yeah. So at 22, we stopped playing, and I was kind of lost for like a month, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And then I found out. I came across the word entrepreneur, and I was like, oh, I'm sort of 22 years old. I've never really come across the word before, and so I read "Losing My Virginity" by Richard Branson, and I just fell in love with the concept that instead of creating music, you could create business.
Yep.
And so I went down that path. It's in some ridiculous ways, not knowing what I was doing. I looked at everything, and then I eventually decided, sort of 6 months later, okay, well, I know I want to do this. What's the language of business? It's accounting.
Right.
So I signed up. I actually had to redo my high school certificate because I did so poorly the first time around, because I was going to be a rock star and I never went to class. So I actually had to resit that for a year. And then I think by about 23, I was able to enroll into management and accounting.
Okay. And what was it about Branson that appealed to you?
He just gave it a shot, and then just relentlessly stuck at it despite the difficulties.
Yeah, that's fair. I read the same book, and it had one of the things I love. He said and it stuck with me the whole time, that one of the greatest myths about entrepreneurship is that it's about taking risks. He said it's not. It's about taking calculated risk, where even if you lose, you still win.
Yeah.
And I think the example he gave was when he started Virgin Atlantic, he leased all the planes because he was like, everyone's like, it's a big risk. He got rid of a lot of the risk. It made really big impact. Yeah,
it's I think there was something I knew, if you think about the whole punk rock thing, it's very DIY. It's very, it's even at its core, it's very much, no one's coming along to sprinkle pixie dust onto you. You can just self-make it. Like, you can do it yourself. And I found that that was very reminiscent in Richard Branson's. And I figured I didn't have like a lot of, opportunity growing up or whatever. And it just seemed like if you stuck at it, it could work. And it almost seemed like an actual recipe to doing something with my life.
We'll come to this later, but it's always struck me that there is a real thread of resilience that's just embedded in your character. You just seem to go at things and go, like when I gave the example of the Instagram thing, and you've obviously sat down there and you've been looking at it and paying attention, trying to work out the mechanics. Whereas a lot of people, myself included, would kind of look at it and go, and then move on. Where does that come from? Is it just innate, or did you learn it from somewhere?
I think it is innate. I think a lot of it's kind of interesting because when you kind of grow up in a place where, success is not even like unachievable, it's kind of looked down upon. And so, I think just if I felt like if I was going to outrun the kind of boring destiny that I sort of was I just had to make a decision to not do that. And it's like a lot of things, there's pros and cons to it.
Yeah. Like independence is another one. I was brought up to be incredibly independent. And the problem with independence is nobody gets anything done success-wise if you're not good at working with other people. So double-edged swords. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of that stuff. Yeah. And like the sort of resilient concept, I think it's worked well to date, but it's actually something I'm sort of looking at now and going, is that going to serve me still? And it's something I'm sort of juggling within my mind at the moment.
Have you read The Dip by Seth Godin?
No.
That's a really good book, and I'll tell you why. Because the whole message of the book is sometimes you shouldn't give up, but sometimes you should. And the trick is to know when to do each. And I like a couple of times, both ways. When I've been doing something in business, I'm like, it's not working. And I read that. I go back and I read this, and it goes, okay, it kind of gives you the fuel to go, this is still the right way. And sometimes it gives you the fuel to go, nah, the best thing to give up and not go down that route. But yeah, it's a tough thing to call.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the advantages. So I kind of grew up in like a little bit of a culty environment as well. Like very, there was just sort of small area, small town. There wasn't even a corner store, and like people get together and play guitars, and it's a little bit weird. But I kind of got brought up in a sort of an environment where people believed in a certain thing, and I just grew up believing in that thing, and then later on realizing that thing isn't entirely correct. And then my band failing, I'm early in life married a groupie, right? So that marriage didn't work. I almost created a superannuation fund a few years ago, but that failed as well. And I've just failed so many things and been wrong so many times that I don't trust myself to be correct very often, unless I'm sure, unless I like understand something inside out, back to front. The chances are, as history has shown, that I'm wrong. And so, yeah, the idea of like giving up, or even just like accepting that I'm not right on something. Like the team that I work with are really good, and they often, like, I'm just so often wrong, and they're so often right.
Means you got the right team.
Yeah, exactly. But the concept of like giving up, or like I'm actually not too bad at giving up now.
There's research that shows one of the attributes that marks really intelligent people out from others is their willingness to change their opinions on things if presented with facts. And I think if you've got people around you,
it's very hard to do. But the pursuit. I always still just see myself as a kid running away from a small town. Like I still, and I'm just doing whatever I can to not end up back there. Like actually, to this day.
I know this isn't strictly where we're going, but I think, how do you feel about imposter syndrome as a concept?
For a long time, yes. I think just recently I figured out what I'm comfortable with, and this kind of thing I'm really uncomfortable with, like talking about myself. So like any event that we always do, like I'm never on stage. The podcasts, I was doing them for a while just because no one else was doing them, but now we've got the whole system set up. Like I try to actually be in the background as much as possible. But when I was younger, I thought that I wanted to be up front because that, everyone said that would make sense, but I hate it. And so, I don't have imposter syndrome as much anymore, only because so much of this company has nothing to do with me, if that makes sense.
I had a similar experience. I was at corporate, as Daryl knows. And I remember, I think it was 2018, I was walking through the airport and I picked up the book, The 4-Hour Workweek.
Yeah, good book.
And I remember reading that and I was just like, I read it, I was like, I'm doing it all wrong. And from that point, my desire, I thought corporate was the thing. Yeah, you climb the corporate ladder, blah, blah, blah. That's how you do it. And it almost switched overnight. I was like, that's not what I want. That's what I thought I was telling myself I wanted. That wasn't what I wanted at all. So you've got this idea that the language of business is accounting. You've gone back to school. Yeah. You've gone out there. Tell me how the accounting thing evolved into advice, basically.
Yeah, well, I was sharing an office. So at this stage, I'd moved to the big city, which was Terrigal.
Nice. Lovely spot.
Yeah, oh, mate, it's brilliant. And I'm working sort of above Subway there in an accounting, sort of just a little accounting firm. Excuse me. And in the office is a life insurance guy, an accountant, and a financial planner. And I'm working for the accountant. And each day I would walk home with the life insurance guy.
Yeah.
And he would walk, 2 minutes while we were right on the water and go into his lovely house, like literally right on the water there at Terrigal. Okay. And I would continue walking for another sort of 10 minutes behind the pub where I had my apartment, right?
Okay.
And there was a real sort of obviousness to it that this guy was making a lot of money and I wasn't. And so I used to, on that sort of 5-minute walk home with him each day, I would just get him to tell me more and more and more about life insurance and how it worked in with financial planning. And yeah, like a lot of people, I didn't know anything about it, but I knew that I was good with numbers and I was good with people. And so after I think about 2 years of working as an accountant, I decided that I wanted to move across into financial planning.
Okay. And so you did within that firm in Terrigal?
No.
Okay.
I started my studies back then, but no, at sort of around about this time, my first relationship or my first marriage sort of fell apart, and I was like, okay, I'm out, and I went traveling around the world for 6 months, and it was only sort of being in South America for about 4 or 5 of those months, and it was very dangerous in the big cities, that it dawned on me that Sydney wasn't that scary.
Sydney's a pussycat compared to Rio, Buenos Aires, Lima.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like growing up, my mum had always told me that Sydney was really scary and they do drive-by shootings, and like the idea of ever living in Sydney was just never going to happen. But spending 6 months overseas, I was like, oh my God, Sydney's definitely not that bad. And so I came back and started working in financial planning here in Sydney in mid 2011.
My brother-in-law, his ex-wife's family were from Sao Paulo, and first time they came over to visit, Sao Paulo is like a big, scary city, right? Yeah. First time they came over, they were shocked. They were blown away. They were like, this place, like Sydney's got like skyscrapers and the streets are clean and they were just like, they remember they turned around to her and said, what on earth are you doing coming back to Brazil? You need your head seen to. But so you came back so you went to live, you ended up in Sydney.
Yes.
I think when I met you, you were at Arrive. Is that correct?
When we met, sorry, what was the question?
We met, I think you were working with David Reed.
Oh,
you were sharing an office, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I had that started 2 years after I landed here in Sydney. I opened my financial planning company. Yeah.
So you actually opened your own business as soon as you landed in Sydney?
2 years. I spent 2 years in financial planning, and then at the end of that, I started. Yeah. So 2 weeks before I turned 30. And it took a long time, right? So back when I knew that I wanted to become an entrepreneur, I'm sort of like 22 years old, and it took me 8 years to actually get it off the ground. So I started my first business 2 weeks before I turned 30, where I was sharing an office. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess there's a whole point where you went from doing that to suddenly being involved in XY. Like, I know it would have come about through, chatting about, but give us a bit of how it must have accelerated quite quickly.
Yeah, it really did. So the story goes, I launched this business, right? And I know how to do financial planning. Like, I'm pretty comfortable with, although I learned a hell of a lot more, but it was not that I didn't know how to be a financial planner. I just didn't know how to grow a financial planning business and improve sort of all the different parts of the advice process. And so when I launched, this gives you an idea of how little I knew. When I launched this company, I also launched something called xyadvisor.com, which was myself as the financial planner to generations X and Y.
Yeah.
So in my head, I was going to write blogs on xyadvisor.com. People would read them because they were sensational, and then they would ask to be my client. Now, after a year
what could go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. After a year of blogging about the most, just anything that I thought of, right? I just knew so little about anything. It had zero traction. So I spent a year blogging, and no one knew about it except for my compliance manager. And I was like, oh, this is not working. And so at about that point in time, I went to an advisor, the social advisor, Baz's social advisor.
Yep.
And he had Brad Fox standing on stage, and Brad Fox said something along the lines of like, if you really want to be a thought leader, like no one's stopping you, just go out and do it. And I was sitting there in the crowd, and I thought, like, again, that sort of super DIY, just make it happen concept. The instruction was just so simple. Like he said, just go and do it. So I was like, okay. And so I pulled out Twitter and I said, Brad, do you want to, like, can you come speak at the very first XY Advisor event? Now, XY Advisor didn't exist beyond this blog that no one was reading. And he says, oh, this is on Twitter. He says, yeah, you can call my office and I'll come. Wow. And I was like, okay, cool. So I called his office and they're like, who is this? And I said, oh, it's Clayton. Anyway, so they were about to hang up and I said, no, I'm the Twitter guy. Tell him I'm from Twitter. And he said to call. So anyway, he takes my call in the end and I pitch him this idea to come speak at an XY Advisor event, which he agrees to. And then I put the phone down and I go, oh no, like I don't know how to put an event on. And so it's going to be myself and Brad Fox drinking beers unless something happens. And that's why I picked up my phone and called my mates and I said, hey, we're called XY Advisor, literally just because I didn't want to pay the $10 to register another domain. I said, we're called XY Advisor and come down because we need to organize an event that Brad Fox is speaking at.
Right.
And Patty and Ben and like Ray and what are you talking about, mate? And I was like, well, I reckon we can learn from people who will tell us how to be a better financial planner. And so they said, okay. And we sold, I think, 30 tickets for $30, which allowed us to hire our first room and put on this small event in a corner of Westpac where we didn't even have a stage. It was literally just in a meeting room. And everyone's looking at me and I'm thinking, okay, I guess I got to kick this thing off. So I just sort of stand in the middle of the room and I'm like, hey, welcome to the first XY Advisor event. We've got Brad Fox to talk about I'll never forget this, like what financial planning would look like if it started today, like if there was no legacy.
I think I've seen him give this presentation as well. So when was this?
This was July 2014.
Okay. That's almost to the day. I think that's almost the day that's literally when I started Our Dairy as a brand. So there you go.
No way. That's cool.
And how many events came after that?
So we started doing an event every about 6 months.
Okay. How many did you get through?
Oh, we only stopped doing them recently, like when COVID came around. So we started doing it every 6 months, and then we started doing them kind of every 3 months.
Okay.
And then we started doing tours of events. So we would do like
on tour with the Volkswagen combi thing.
Yeah. And so we ended up doing about 50 events in the end. Quite a number, yeah.
And then the group, obviously a Facebook group to start with. Did that come pretty quickly, or did it come a bit later?
So originally it was on LinkedIn, and it didn't work.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So for the first year, it was on LinkedIn, and it didn't work. So no one was using it. And
what do you think? What do you put that down to?
I would say the mindset that LinkedIn curates is one of I am the professional. Look at me, come buy from me. Whereas the mindset that Ensombl curates is, hey, I need some help with something. How do I do this better? They're actually like, although functionally they're very similar, they're very different mindsets when you walk into them.
I've always felt people at the time on LinkedIn had a mask on, whereas people on Facebook at the time, they didn't. It's changed a lot. And it's interesting. It's always been, you market on Facebook in a professional way, which it's a social network, but you market professionally. On LinkedIn, it's a professional network, but it's completely social in terms of the way you market. I mean, you can do adverts and things, but they're not as effective. Actually, can I take it back? I did want to ask one question. Yeah. You did a year of blogging with no traction.
Yeah, none.
And I know that I think there's a lot of advisors out there and a lot of people out there who they blog a lot, and maybe they thought they'd get more of a splash. When you look back on what you were doing wrong, have you identified what you hadn't worked out yet, or did you never quite work that one out?
No, it's just I had no plan, I had no strategy, I had no purpose, I had no idea of what success looked like, beyond just assuming that someone was going to pick up the phone and give me a call. Like it was actually horrible. Like it was absent of any thinking.
So when you decided to pick up the phone and have that conversation with Brad, how clear was the purpose in doing that? It wasn't
not at all.
Okay.
No, I was just going from, like something needs to, like I need to get better at being a financial planner. And
Right.
I think the best way is to learn from other people. That was kind of my
scratching your own itch, basically.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yes.
And so you're doing these events, and they're starting to get traction. The Facebook group's growing bigger and bigger, and I must admit, I spoke to you. I think I spoke to you at this point, and there was a whole period, if I remember rightly, where you knew that it was headed north pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But you guys had you didn't know what you were going to do with it.
Yeah. Definitely.
Tell me what that was like, to be in this thing that's driving in a direction, but not really knowing what direction it's going.
It was kind of killing me in the sense that, because none of us were getting paid, and all that we would do is we would have one weekly meeting for 2 hours from 7 to 9, like on a Thursday or something, right? So that's all it was. That was the total amount of organizational, like it just, we were really doing a lot on very, very little. And so I actually tried to get it shut down. I think I was working somewhere. I was doing something, again, like actual work. And I got a call from, like, it was either an advisor. No, it was a client, a call from a client. And they was telling me that something was wrong in the ecosystem that was XY Advisor. And I was like, all I could think of was, yeah, of course, because no one's working in this company that now everyone thinks is a company. And so I went to the guys and I was like, hey, we've got to shut this down because people are now expecting something from us that we can't give because no one's working in this company. And so I was like, I think it's a reputational risk at this point to keep this thing alive because people think it's more than what it is.
Did you ever get an email from Michael Kitsis?
No.
About the because they got the XY planning network over there, right?
Yeah, but if you look at who registered the website first, like ours predates theirs. Yeah. So in their defense though, we weren't, it was just a shitty little blog. Like it was never meant to become anything. So they wouldn't have initially seen any problem with it. But over time it sort of changed its purpose. And it was, I tried to get the thing shut down because everyone was it was getting used a lot. This Facebook group was getting used a lot. A lot of people started listening to the podcast. A lot of people were coming to our events. And there was a time there where it was, we've got to shut this thing down. And then the guys wanted to keep it around, and to their credit.
And I must admit at the time there's a lot of stuff going around about what could get said, what couldn't get said on the forum, where there was liability, because there's still liability for that sort of stuff. I mean, at the time, I think it was like, if something is said on a forum, you're responsible for it. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I know there was a lot of questions about how it would be utilized. Could it be utilized for promotion? What if if you put I remember I had the first ever interaction I had with Emily. I think someone asked a question. I put a link to a blog and she said, I'm really, really sorry, but you can't do that. And I was like, wow, this is an interesting little space, because you've got, it must have been like trying to work out, untie a massive knot while it's tying itself.
Absolutely. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, it was. We had no idea about, so many things. It did feel like it was bigger than anyone was paying attention to it. Sorry, go on.
Is there a moment that in your mind, XY, maybe not in name, but in form and purpose, suddenly switched over to becoming what is now Ensombl?
It was probably around this time, pretty much around this time when I was trying to get it shut down, and the guys said, look, before we shut it down, let's just ask a couple of people if they would be willing to invest in it.
Right. And
I said, guys, we've got a Facebook group, a podcast, and we put events on. There's nothing to invest in. And at the time I was doing some stuff with raising capital. And so I said, okay, I'll put together 4 slides. I'll never forget, like I put zero effort into it. It was just blank white background with blank Arial text. And it was like, do you want to invest in XY Advisor? We do these 3 things. $1 million valuation. If you give us 50 grand, you get 5%. That was like the total.
Yeah, I remember the prospectus came out, and I must admit, I looked at it, I was like, I don't know what you're buying.
Yeah, exactly.
But it obviously works, man.
Well, so what happened was, and this is what the big change was, is Roxy got this 4-page slide deck, and he said, all right, I'm gonna like actually take you guys and structure you up, and this is how you're going to spend the money, and this is how you're not going to spend the money, and if you do this, I'll invest.
What?
And yeah.
What did Roxy see in it?
Probably, and I think it was just he would have loved it. The way that he talks about it is he would have loved it if it was around when he was starting out in planning. So he just said, I don't know what's here. I just know that I like it, and I don't want it to go anywhere. That was kind of it.
It's kind of like Kerry Packer deciding, you don't want to. He likes that pub, so he's going to pay for it just so he can drink it every night. Maybe not. That's a bad analogy, but
yeah, no. It's that kind of thing. Yeah, like, yeah.
So, talk me through how it went from being what it was to being a business that was able to and say, this is what we do and this is how we generate and get more and more traction. Was it a smooth ride? That's the first question I want to ask.
No. So first of all, we had no direction, in the sense that there was no company that we could follow. So we didn't know what the business model was going to be, right? I think, and we'd always said that we don't want to do this if advisors have to constantly, dip into their pocket. Like, if someone's going to pay for something, I would prefer that they would go to you, Stu, for example, right? If someone's reaching into their pocket,
to be honest,
yeah, exactly, and someone that's there to help and guide them if they're going to pay money on a platform, it's very different in the sense that we wanted to keep it free. And so how the hell do you grow a company in an environment where everything's free? And so it took us a long time. It wasn't easy, but we just kept running towards the alignment between what the advisor community wanted and what our client community wanted. And that was essentially education. So that was the direction we took.
I know we've spoken about this before, and you mentioned that there are certain aspects of the free model that people have preconceptions about freemium.
Yeah.
But what is it about making it free as opposed to getting people to pay for it? This is something I know all of you guys were very strong on right from the very start. Tell me where that comes from.
I don't think Ensombl would be around first and foremost if we did charge for it. I just don't think that.
I don't think it would have grown as quickly.
No, it wouldn't have. Yeah. And so it was just a sort of philosophical, like, where, for lack of a better term, we're advisors, for advisors, about advice, that kind of concept. I think that was pretty much the guiding light, which is, if we can't do it like this, then we just shouldn't do it.
Darryl makes a really good point there. He says the value is the access to the profession, 100%. But if you pay, it restricts the audience. And I think it's probably that's an underlying philosophy behind social media, really, at the beginning, wasn't it? It was about connection through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it still is for us. Like, we're things are going quite well, and we're looking to expand around the world. And for better or worse, people just don't want to pay for apps. You know what I mean? Like Google Maps is free, and Instagram is free, and yeah, they've got their own business models which are questionable. But we figured out a way to monetize the positive evolution of financial advice, right? So like that's our purpose. That's our reason for existing. And it became about, the challenge was like, how do we make money while doing that?
Interesting. Like what I know, I've got a thing about tech startup thing, and that was how Our Dairy came about. It was like my experiences, and I was like, stuff's awesome. Let's teach this or introduce it, and suddenly to advice businesses, and this wonderful merge that came, and there was so much enthusiasm for the concepts, and smart people in the industry were like, yeah, I can see how that would work. And I get a feeling a lot of what the path you guys have been on has been influenced by thinking about yourselves as being a tech business. Would you say that's fair?
Yes, we've always considered the business a tech business. Yes, that's probably one of the guiding lights that, we never wanted to create another voice, right? Like we don't want to be in an association or we don't want to be a licensee. Like we knew that there's enough grown-ups in the room that we don't need to have a voice. We just need to facilitate. And that's been a guiding light.
A lot of what we've seen, particularly with YouTube and places like that, is they've gone down the advertising route. And in many ways, that media has turned into just what used to be TV, infuriating and annoying interruption marketing. But you guys have done something different. You've gone, no, we're not. And I remember having a conversation with you at the start. You said, we don't want to just become something that is paid for by third parties. You want to do it differently. And the route you went down was around data and analysis.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a bit about this? Because it's an interesting place, because there's been a lot of talk about this over the past 5 years, that it's almost, in many places, it's seen as being a little bit murky. It's something people are nervous about.
Yes.
Talk about, your view on it and how it works in Ensombl's case, and whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, or it can be both.
Well, I can tell you up front, I think what we do is perfectly in line with driving the positive evolution of financial advice. Now, there are business models around data which don't drive the positive evolution of financial advice, right? So it's almost like using the word data is probably where it gets murky, right? So there are many companies out there that will just go around and figuring out what financial planners' emails are, and then just selling that as a product to me, that's just a business model that does not drive the positive evolution of financial advice. So the data that we excel in, and I think it's talk about like a flywheel. I think this is, and I didn't come up with it by myself in a moment. It's been developed by many people over many years, but this is where we are right now, which is advisors talk about what they want to talk about, unprompted. These are the genuine concerns. These are the problems that we need solved. Rather than that just floating off into the ether, we capture all of the conversation, and what we're looking for is trends and threads and levels of interest. And so if one person says one thing, that's not very valuable.
Yeah.
Regardless of who it is and what it is that's been said. But if 10 people or 20 or 30 or 100, if 1,000 people are talking about something and they're finding there's a lot of traction around something, well, then all of a sudden that's where the value is. And so the way that we use data is the complete antithesis of the Facebook model. So the Facebook model is to know everything about the individual as much as possible. And then any company can create any advertisement and sent to any person. So any company, any advertisement, any person, right? Yep. We took the complete opposite approach. We said, well, rather than focus on the individual, we want to focus on the collective. And the more people that are saying something, well, then all of a sudden the privacy is enhanced, not reduced. And it's not anyone can say anything to anybody. We vet the companies, we control what they say, and it goes to everyone. It's not about targeted advertising. It's about getting it to all financial planners. When I say we control what they say, what I mean is we use the conversations that are going on in the platform to be the backbone of the education that's created. So it's a very different model.
So when you first explained it to me, I kind of think a traditional way of and one of the reasons why the internet became so useful is because traditionally product developers used to rely on focus groups. And there's all
Yes.
these inherent just biases that go on with focus groups, which mean that, to be honest, I don't think they're worth anything most of the time.
Totally.
Yeah.
I agree.
But what you're doing with this is you've got a bunch of conversations that are already happening about, some of
Yes.
them are relevant, some of them are not relevant.
Yes.
And you got people come along and say, we have this question about whether, this product, people need this and this, and you're
That's
dipping
right.
into what is a pre-existing body of knowledge,
Yeah.
which is not identified. You're not identifying any one person. It's a collective insight.
Correct. Yes.
And then you say, well, this large group of people who match your target market who say they don't want that thing. What matters to them is something like this, right?
Yeah. Correct.
And the value exchange that you're giving in return for being able to leverage that collective conversation is the platform.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So
yeah, it does.
one thing though, and this is the one thing that I think is really important to discuss. Like, there are platforms out there where they'll take that data and they'll utilize it to sell things to people they don't need or don't want, that aren't in their best interest. How can you make sure that what's going to come out of this is the companies you're working with are actually going to produce things that are useful and they're going to drive the evolution rather than fill their own pockets?
Yeah, correct. So obviously, like, no matter how big Ensombl gets, Facebook is still going to always exist, right? So like, Facebook's always going to be a lot bigger than we are. So I don't think that we're an antidote to what goes on across the world. I think ultimately marketing will still do marketing, sales will still do sales. I don't think we can stop that, right? What I think we can do though is, right now we're working with a client, and there's a good chance that we're going to take on another piece of work, which is to help design a new life insurance product.
Okay.
So that to me is a perfect example of driving the positive evolution of financial advice.
Yep.
Because we're going to take all the problems, all the issues that financial planners are saying that they're having with life insurance, and we're going to use that as the basis for what product would they use.
Okay.
So one of the concepts one of the terminologies that I like to think about is it is research as a service, right? So like, let's say I was a plumber, and let's say there was a platform where people with plumbing problems all discussed their plumbing problems, right?
Yeah.
And then out of this plumbing problems platform, it would tell me, hey, these are the main 10 problems that people with plumbing problems are experiencing. Yeah. I can then build my company to better solve those 10 problems, right? So this business model expands well beyond just financial planners. And
okay.
I think that's a foreshadowing.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It opens a conversation. There's a book called Crossing the Chasm. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's about, one of the easiest ways to start a business is to start in a niche. But sooner or later, the more niched you are, the harder it gets to expand, because ultimately,
yes.
So there's a point at which you have to take your product from being niche to something that's more mass market.
That's right. Yeah. And the fact that we took the word advisor out of our business name is kind of a point in turn.
Okay. Interesting. I'm not going to ask any more questions because
we're subject matter experts in financial planning. So we're never going to leave financial planning. But, do accountants, lawyers, mortgage brokers, do other professions deserve to have something like this? I think.
Mate, I'm hearing you loud and clear. Trust me. I know exactly where you're coming from. The other strategy is obviously you can go overseas.
Which is, so we're opening our first international office in August.
Nice.
Yeah.
So without giving too much away, like, where are you guys at now? Are you, what are the numbers like?
Yeah, numbers are good. So we're probably close to 8,000 financial advice members on Ensombl right now. Mostly Australian based, although there's about 20, 30 different countries that are on there, but it's currently it's not relevant for them. So we're doing a lot of work to be able to make this relevant globally. So the way that you would kind of do that is you would quarantine each user to the country that their regulatory environment is relevant to. But that's not to say that, let's say I have a client that's going to England. It's not to say that I can't, manually jump across to England to have a look around, find high quality financial planners that I can refer my client to, for example.
Gotcha. Mate, we can keep going. I'm going to ask you some more questions, but before we go, I just wanted, if anybody's listening to this and they want to find out more or they want to get involved, like, where do they go to do it? Is it
Ensombl.com?
Ensombl.com? And what's the sign up process? Just jump in there.
Yeah.
Give me the firstborn child and away you go.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a couple of questions. It's, to be quite frank, it's a horrible sign up process at the moment. One of the things that we're working on, we're sort of limited in what we can do at the moment because we're not like some hugely funded startup. However, it's looking like it's going to change. So potentially 12 months from now, we might be a very different company.
Well, I've got a couple of questions that have come up. Daryl's put some in, so I'm going to fire them at you, and then I just want to ask two questions to finish off. Daryl wants to know, will your paying clients come on Ensombl and throw up questions to the community to gauge an appetite for the product they're thinking of launching?
Look, that is certainly something that we're considering. Yeah, the issue with surveys, the issue with focus groups is that it's leading the witness, Your Honor, right? There's a lot of
wonder what everyone else is answering.
Yeah, exactly. So while there's not a huge amount of value in that, I think it would be relevant to provide an option for it to exist. How and where and when, the details I haven't entirely solved yet. But yes. Okay.
The second question, also from Daryl, is how do you increase the penetration from 50% of Australian advisors to, let's say, 90%?
I think ultimately we'll never hit 90. I think that talking about crossing the chasm, I think the laggards, the last 20%, I just don't think will ever join. We're about one in three financial planners at the moment with sort of corresponding, members that aren't exactly active financial planners right now. Think of BDMs or support staff, operational staff, CEOs, that kind of thing, paraplanners. So it's not just financial planners; it's relevant stakeholders. I think it's just a matter of time until there's a slow onward march of just it getting bigger and bigger. Within probably 3 years, I think we'll probably cap out. Hence why we need to sort of start looking at new territories.
Where do you see the industry? I mean, the industry's changed a lot since you started.
Yeah.
Technology's become more and more plentiful. People are more comfortable in the digital medium than they were before. I think the mode of delivering advice and engaging with clients has become a lot more casual, I'd say, informal.
Yep.
Like when you look forward to the next, 7-9 years, where do you think we'll be in 9 years? I've got to ask you that because it's the tech question, right?
Yeah, no, totally. I think financial planners have an amazing opportunity in front of them to actually compete with the banks. And the large super funds. I think advisors have an opportunity to create small versions of large companies. So using technology, you can look after hundreds, thousands of clients, and all paying different sort of levels of fees. I'm very bullish. I think the answer to scalable advice is actually human. Like, I think scalable advice can be solved with a financial planner looking after, say, 100 clients in one meeting that are each paying $10 a month or whatever to be there, and then 50 people in a meeting that are all paying $100 a month, and then 10 people that are each paying $500 a month. And I think that there is a huge opportunity out there. It's not for Ensombl to solve. However, might be doing something else that is headed down that path. But I'm excited for financial planning for sure. And there's so much money that's coming into the industry right now. It's crazy. We're talking like in the billions. I'm not sure if anyone saw on the weekend, there was a huge article on Paul Barrett's AZNGA, turning down $600 million offer, right?
I didn't see that.
Yeah,
I do know.
The money is coming. It's a great opportunity.
Well, if any of them know they want to buy the best coaching business in the world, let me know.
Great.
And I'll refer them through to the person who owns it. Mate, final question. And if there's any other questions people want to put out, please let me know. Looking back on the journey, I mean, is there anything that has gone as you thought it would in retrospect?
If I'm being honest, when I took over, at that line down the middle, when we came on Ensombl and Roxy came on as chairman, and I came on as the CEO. The only thing that was predictable is I knew it was going to work.
It's interesting.
I didn't know how. I didn't know a single how, but I knew it was going to work. And that's the only thing, is that the fact that we're here, and I honestly think that we're just scratching the surface. Like there's a lot of work ahead.
Love it. Mate, this has been an absolute joy. We could choose any one of these topics and we could go into fintech. Where's it going to go? We could talk about, I think we should do this again in about a year or two and see how we go. But mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks also to everybody who's come along. If you have any, Ensombl has an O. What have I put? Oh, I did. Yeah. Thank you.
That's all right. That's all right. To be honest, I didn't even notice. So thank you, Daryl.
No, I basically, you know what? It's because I did convert to text. Thank you so much. Apologies. This is why ChatGPT is a boon, because I don't have to copy edit anymore. I'm terrible at it. Guys, it's been absolute pleasure. I hope you got what do you got planned for the weekend, by the way? Oh, actually, we've already had this conversation. Yeah.
Young kids, so everything's very predictable. It's sports, barbecues, and watching rock music.
We'll enjoy all of that in whatever order you want it. Thank you again. And mate, I can't wait to see the next phase in this journey and more.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the questions. I do find this very uncomfortable talking about myself, but I'm happy to do it here. So
mate, I wouldn't have guessed. Put it that way. It's funny, the people who are often the most uncomfortable with it are the ones that always look like they're most at ease. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Cheers,
have a
guys.
great one.
Cheers, everyone.
Take care. See ya. Thanks.
Bye.
How awesome was that? I hope you really enjoyed that. I hope you gathered from listening to the conversation, I just got so much out of that as well. So if you're not already familiar with Ensombl, I would suggest going and getting involved. It's a great forum. It's a great place for advisors to engage with other advisors. And increasingly, it's becoming a bit of a global platform for doing so. So it's well worth checking out. If you're not familiar with it, if you are familiar with it, well, I hope you learn a lot more about Clayton than you did before. Hey, I just want to give a shout out. Over the next few podcasts, we're going to take the podcast in a bit of a different direction. I've always focused the Finovator on being having conversations with program members, people who've got really special stories to tell, or just practitioners who've got great success and sharing their stories. But it was actually a conversation with Clayton that made me realize that there is a host of content that I've created over the last 7 or 8 years in the program. And one of my great joys is building a program where there is so much on-demand training content that covers so many different areas of advice business. And I came to the realization about 6 months ago that I've got so much of this content there, and much of it is kind of hasn't been shared more widely. So over the next few months, I want to share with you some recordings of live modules where I've taught key concepts to program members, and we're going to unpack everything from websites to launching a client portal. We're going to talk about pricing. We're going to talk about the importance of your client experience, and I'm going to lay out for you in detail how I do it, how I coach businesses to do it, how to implement, and all those sort of things. I hope you love it. Hope you like it. And if you do, the best thing you could do is just take some time to go down to the review section in whichever podcast platform, and if you love it, give us a thumbs up or a 5-star and just a comment, because that is the thing that helps me to know that you enjoy it. It gives me a bit of direction as to where I'm going and gives me a little bit of encouragement to keep going. And of course, if you want to fast track it and get access to all of the Masterclass visual recordings, many of which have been turned into podcasts, you can go over to our website, audere.com.au, that's audere.com.au, and just look out for Leverage Lab. That is our free best practice client portal. Just fill in the form, then we'll be in contact. We'll set you up with full access so you can go in there and check out a whole bunch of other stuff in there. But for the time being, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Innovator. I'll see you again soon.